My high school dropout brother is our family's disgrace, my stepfather Daniel said. Something outrageous to me. It was my brother Will's wedding day, and his beloved daughter was getting married. This must have been the reason for all the weirdness in the hall. Not only did he dislike me and harass me, but ruining my brother's wedding was unforgivable. So I decided to get back at him before I left the venue. Our $300 million contract with your company is off the table. What? As expected, Daniel, who didn't know who I really was stunned. While he was in shock, I pressed on because I needed to break his spirit. Listening to my words, Daniel eventually regretted his actions. My name is Charles Johnson. I recently turned 43. Lately, I've been obsessed with my hobbies, and my room is filled with cartoon merchandise. It all started with friends I met through work, who taught me many things. Supporting your favorites is great. They add more joy to your daily life. When there's a lot of fan fiction, you have more opportunities to interact with other people. Also, it's nice to be able to communicate with people you wouldn't normally be able to talk to. They taught me the perks of fandom activities. At first, I thought it was embarrassing to be so passionate about such things at my age, but once I tried, I found many interesting works and got hooked. Among the cartoons out there, many have good storylines, and for those that don't, you can still have fun discussing them with others online. As I kept doing this, I realized I had become a geek too. At first, I felt embarrassed, but as I continued with fandom activities, I discovered that there were surprisingly some men in my age group. So now I support my favorite characters without any hesitation. This is probably due to the influence of watching hero cartoons with my brother when we were kids. When we were little, we often played hero games together, promising to help those in need when we grew up. Unfortunately, I didn't become a hero and ended up working in an ordinary company. But my brother Will became a lawyer and was helping people in need. Will, 3 years younger than me, was smart since childhood. He smoothly climbed the path to becoming a lawyer without much struggle. However, being a lawyer seems quite challenging. No matter how smart you are, you will be stressed. Since I know nothing about legal matters, I hope someone can support Will. Just when I was thinking that, he met someone special, and I was surprised. Around the time the rainy season ended, I was standing nervously in front of a certain house under a bright, dry sky. After pressing the intercom, I waited for the resident to come out. Standing next to me was my brother Will. "You've been smiling too much. You're acting weird, so stop that expression." "My bad, I'm sorry. Given the purpose of today, it was hard not to be happy." We're both middle-aged men, but as his older brother, it's only natural. I've always felt this way. What happened to my brother made me so happy, I can't help but be happy that you finally found a wife. Seriously, that's my line. You haven't found a wife yet either, bro. We were about to greet Will's bride and her family. Yesterday, out of the blue, Will called me and said on the phone, "I actually have a girlfriend." I was surprised, but then he said, "I'm planning to visit her house," and I was even more shocked. Honestly, it was so sudden I was just stunned, but it was definitely a joyful thing. Will had admired heroes of justice since he was a child, so I thought he had no interest in romance and was married to justice. It was such a pleasant surprise that when I heard it, I almost doubted if it was a dream. When you called yesterday, I was really shocked. I pinched my cheeks so many times thinking it might be a dream. "Look, it's a bit red here, right?" I explained to Will, pointing at my cheek. "Come on, you're too old to be acting like a kid. Seriously, getting that excited over something that's not even about you." Will shrugged his shoulders with a look of exasperation. In the meantime, the door of the house in front of us opened. "Welcome, Will." Charles, the woman who came out of the house, was Mary Miller. She was 40, the same age as Will. She had a gentle smile and seemed very pleasant. "Thank you for coming. My mother and father are waiting. Please come in." We followed Mary inside. As we walked slowly, I realized the size of the house. From the seemingly endless hallway, I thought this must be a prominent family. Hey, Will, does Mary's family have a long history? I haven't heard the details yet, but I heard they have a long history, and everyone in the Miller family is highly educated. It seems my guess was right. Coming from a regular family, it felt like a different world. While I was lost in thought, the long hallway finally ended. We were shown to the living room and introduced ourselves to Mary's parents. Thank you for coming all this way. We welcome you. I stumbled over my words a few times, but I was relieved that I could have a good conversation with my Mill. However, I couldn't have a good talk with my Phil Daniel. He barely spoke and looked at me with a stern expression, noticing the cartoon merchandise on my belongings. That keychain is something I see on commercials sometimes. Are you a fan of cartoons? Yes, it's from a popular cartoon right now. Then I got caught up in the conversation and ended up talking a lot about cartoons. When I snapped back to reality, I realized I'd been talking for over 10 minutes and felt embarrassed. Even though Mary and my Mill listened to my stories with a smile, Daniel reacted differently. Cartoon is just nonsense. I think there is much less prejudice against such things nowadays, but there are still people who view cartoons and comics negatively. Maybe he's one of those people. I didn't want to cause any cracks in the relationship between Will and his Mary's family because I talked too much during their important meeting. Panicking, I tried to continue with just kidding, but Daniel spoke first. You mentioned earlier that you dropped out of high school. Is that true? Yes, it is. I became a company employee right after graduating from middle school. I was quite poor back then. Your name is Charles, but you don't seem very wise. They say names reflect character, but you seem to be an exception. The moment Daniel said this, the air in the room froze. It was so welcoming just moments ago, and now I wanted to bury my head in my hands. I have nothing more to say to you. I'll excuse myself. What exactly went wrong? I stared at Daniel, who looked visibly displeased. Hey, Dad, that was rude, Will said. Mary tried to stop him, but Daniel ignored her and left the living room. Mary, left behind, turned pale and apologized to me. I'm really sorry. My father tends to judge people by their education and dislikes those who watch cartoons or read comics. He had a rigorous education and spent all his time studying, so that might be why. Daniel probably resented others having fun while he was studying hard. Although I had my thoughts about it, I didn't intend to blame Mary. It's okay. I should have been more careful with my words to avoid being misunderstood. I then struggled to get back into the good atmosphere, talking about Will's past. Though things were awkward with Daniel, at least Mary and my Mill didn't seem to think badly of me. I worried that I might cause them to break up, but fortunately, Will and Mary were closer than I had imagined. Will kept sending me gushing emails about Mary, which got a bit annoying. Their relationship progressed smoothly, and a few months later, Will and Mary decided to get married. On the wedding day, I had prepared myself and was visiting the ceremony site. For someone as frugal as Will, he had chosen a large and impressive building. It was surprising since he's the type to donate money rather than spend it on luxuries. It showed just how important this wedding with Mary was to him. Thinking about Will's feelings, I headed inside and ran into some friends. They were mutual acquaintances of mine and Will and were invited to the wedding today. Hey, Charles. Long time, no see. You look like you're radiating happiness. What kind of aura is that? But it's true. I'm really happy that my brother is finally getting married, he replied. He seemed like he was going to marry Justice instead. We invited him to so many blind dates in college, and he turned them all down. The friend in front of me spoke in a casual tone. He's younger than me, but Will's friends usually don't care much about hierarchy. This kind of conversation was common. I prefer it this way since I didn't like stiff conversations, though people might misunderstand and think it was rude. By the way, the heroine in that cartoon we watched recently was super cute. The production team really knew how to highlight her appeal. My excited friend opened his mouth about our common topic, cartoons. Unfortunately, at that moment, Daniel arrived. Birds of a feather flock together. Speaking ignorantly to your elders is disgraceful, and getting excited over such a trivial thing as dropping out of high school. I turned to see Daniel sneering at us. He said goodbye to a man in a suit who had given him a ride. Apparently, he had been dropped off by this man. The man said, "No problem at all, sir. My car smelled awful after my wife spilled food in it the other day. I couldn't risk my suit for this important wedding. I really appreciate it." I looked at the man with Daniel and tilted my head back. I was feeling like I had seen him somewhere before. I couldn't remember immediately, so I filed the thought away. Who is that rude old man? I heard a small voice beside me and saw my friend looking annoyed. I was worried that my friend might say something rude, and I hurriedly introduced him. "This is Miller. Daniel, Will's Phil." "What? Will's? I see." Clearly flustered, my friend tried to cover up his initial reaction, but Daniel seemed to see right through him. He extended his hand for a handshake, but Daniel ignored it. "Yes, I am Will's Phil, a lawyer. But with Charles, sorry, but I'll go ahead." Daniel gave a small nod and left. Watching him walk away, my friend muttered, "What a rude old man. He practically said he doesn't want to be family with you, Charles." "Come on, don't worry about it. Besides, it's Will's wedding today. We shouldn't talk bad about people." Though still upset, my friend seemed to calm down after I reassured him repeatedly. Then we walked into the venue, chatting about our favorite cartoons. I decided to turn off my phone and took it out of my pocket. I saw a few emails from my company about upcoming plans and decided to reply. This could be a perfect time to launch our new product, I thought. Then I'll have to think about all kinds of product presentations. However, I was whispering and muttering the contents of the text message, but my friend overheard. "Hey, is that something I should be hearing? Given your position?" "It's fine. Anything really sensitive I handle at the office." "Got it. That's good. Then I understand why he might be worried, considering my position. I have a lot of responsibilities at work. Thanks for looking out for me. A good guy like you makes me want to recruit you for my company. It'd be fun to have you around, and you'd brighten the place up. That's exactly why you're in a leadership position. I think you are the kind of person who deserves to be in a higher position." With this exchange, we entered the venue and took our assigned seats. As we sat apart, killing time, the start of the ceremony approached quickly. Time flew by as I listened to an interesting conversation nearby. It was about a recent corporate scandal. Since my company does business with that firm, I couldn't help but be interested. However, I needed to shift my focus because Will's wedding was about to begin. Will and Mary's wedding, which I was looking forward to, began with an uneasy atmosphere. There were several differences from what I had been told. Will had told me beforehand how the wedding would go. He said they would play his favorite upbeat music and decorate the venue with balloons that Mary loves, but the scene before me was completely different. The music was frightening, and the decorations included specimens of creepy creatures. What's with this venue? At first, I thought I came to the wrong place. Seriously, it feels more like a haunted house than a wedding. The guests around us were murmuring suspiciously as well. What on earth was going on? As the wedding progressed, I watched the entrance of the bride and groom with confusion. Will and Mary entered, initially looking happy, but they quickly realized something was off. They looked around the venue, bewildered. So, Will and Mary didn't know about these changes. Who turned the wedding venue into this? A certain person came to mind, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. No matter how much you want to, you would not do such a reckless thing at your precious daughter's ceremony. But I soon found out that my prediction was right. When it was Daniel's turn to give a speech, he started saying strange things. After a brief greeting, he dropped a bombshell. "Everyone, You must be wondering why this venue looks so strange. It's because of Charles, holding the mic. Daniel glared straight at me. Charles is a terrible person, unworthy of this venue. Realizing this was bad, I stood up and pretended to feel ill, slowly making my way out. Daniel was clearly about to slander me. He intended to fabricate lies and make me the villain. I didn't want him to ruin my brother's special day, but confronting him would only complicate matters. So I tried to leave quietly, but he ruined my plan. Let me be blunt, Will's older brother Charles is the worst. He is trying to tear Will and Mary apart and is harassing us. The strange behavior of this venue is also his way of harassing us, pointing at me. Daniel continued to spew 100% false accusations. Will and Mary sat up in surprise at these words. Mill, who had been quietly watching the situation until now, was standing as well. Our Mill, who had been quietly observing, also looked distressed, unable to ignore her husband's behavior any longer. I aimed for the exit, but Daniel's speech continued. When I talked to him recently, he mentioned that he dropped out of high school. It's because he didn't receive a proper education that he turned out like this, resenting other people's happiness. Daniel was just shifting the blame. The idea that dropping out of high school causes problems is absurd. It's just his biased assumption. He must be jealous of his brother's success as a lawyer. What a pathetic man. But Daniel, oblivious to the absurdity of his words, continued speaking. I can't imagine being in a family with someone who is so poorly educated, who has graduated from prestigious universities, boasting about his family's academic achievements, he loudly declared. My high school dropout brother is our family's disgrace. But then Will shouted in protest, Don't consult my brother. The real disgrace here is you, Phil. Will's voice echoed through the venue, a tone I'd never heard before. With a stern expression, Will confronted Daniel. My brother decided to work right after middle school to earn money for my tuition. He made sure at least I could go to high school, even if both of us couldn't. Will seemed visibly enraged. At this rate, the wedding would be a complete disaster. If the main characters started fighting, there'd be no way to control the situation. So, I had no choice but to stop leaving and walk towards Daniel. Then, as Will was scolding him, I said something to shut him up. Our $300 million contract with your company is off the table. The shocking statement silenced him. While Daniel stood there stunned, I continued. I didn't want to bring this up, but given the emergency, I have no choice. Thinking quickly, I carefully chose my next words. I couldn't afford to fail, not for my brother's sake. I needed to break Daniel's spirit before he could recover. Daniel, your company does business with mine. I didn't realize it at first, but I recognized the person who drove you here. You're the president of a company affiliated with ours. How do you know that? I never mentioned it to you. Well, you avoided me before we could talk about anything. You said you didn't want to discuss personal matters. I now remembered that the man who drove Daniel was someone I had often met through business a few years ago. The man who drove Daniel used to work in the sales department of another company. He was a diligent worker and got promoted to the president's secretary. Though we lost touch as he got busier, we still exchanged emails. I had heard from him about his boss, the president, who was a staunch believer in academic elitism and looked down on those with less education. He also mentioned some of the president's hobbies. Just between us, the president loves haunted house music and collects animal specimens. At the time, I scolded him for sharing personal details, but I never thought this information would come in handy. Daniel had altered the wedding's music and decorations to make me look bad, but his own preferences betrayed him. Having said all this, I looked Daniel in the eye. Additionally, I always know who we do business with. I was aware of your name. It's standard practice for a CEO. When I first met Daniel at the Miller house, I thought it might be a coincidence and planned to ask for more details after introductions. But Daniel refused to converse with me, so I couldn't confirm his identity. Then are you telling me that you are a company president? Yes, I am. I work as president despite my low education. I continued, making sure to hit Daniel where it hurt most, his disdain for people with less education. I heard that Daniel's company has been struggling lately due to a family scandal. Their products aren't selling well. Guests had mentioned this before the ceremony started. Customers having a negative image of their products is a serious issue. Losing a $300 million contract would be a significant blow. You don't have to apologize to me, but please apologize for your outburst against those middle school graduates. Besides, you will also apologize for almost ruining this wedding with your personal feelings. This makes me look pretty bad from his perspective, but I can't help it. To protect my brother Will's wedding, I was willing to play the bad guy. Daniel's face turned red, and he glared at me for a few seconds. However, he seemed to understand what he needed to do as a company president. He apologized deeply. I'm sorry. I let my mouth run without thinking. Please forgive my careless remarks. I also apologize for my comments about education. The fact that he chose words that indicated insincerity showed his true character. I directed the staff to change the music and decorations. I thought it would be better this way and went overboard. I'm truly sorry. Though I had my thoughts, I got the apology I wanted. Sighing, I decided to accept his apology. After that, a slightly awkward atmosphere lingered, but the wedding proceeded smoothly. I didn't want to stay, but I chose to stand in the corner and watch. I didn't think Daniel would just stay quiet. However, it seemed he had finally given up causing trouble. The wedding was over, and all the invited guests had left. Friends came to say goodbye before exiting the venue. Do you think he acted out because we were talking about geek stuff? No way, you're overthinking it. Thanks for being here for Will today. We were happy to see you. Before I left, I had to reassure a friend who was worried that our conversation had triggered Daniel's behavior. Also, I must mention how Mary and my mother-in-law apologized to me. I'm truly sorry. I'll have a stern talk with Daniel later. I'll make sure to give him a good scolding too. I'm sorry for the embarrassment. Seeing how genuinely remorseful they were, I had no hard feelings. You don't need to apologize. You couldn't have predicted this. You've both been very kind to me. With that, I said goodbye to them. Will looked indignant and spoke to me. No matter if he's going to be my father-in-law, that was awful. I love Mary, but I might never get along with him. I had a hard time pacifying him as he seemed to have been in a head rush ever since the wedding was interrupted. I had heard from other lawyers that Will always handled work calmly, but seeing him like this, it was hard to believe. When I told him that, he snapped. It's natural to be upset when someone insults my family. I told him not to worry too much and, with a wry smile, sent him to the dressing room to change. Now, there would be no more reason for me to be here. As I was about to leave the venue and head home, Daniel unexpectedly showed up. Given what happened earlier, I instinctively tensed up. Was what you said earlier true? Daniel, sweating profusely, asked me. He grabbed my sleeve, desperate to stop me from leaving. You said at the venue that you would cancel the contract with my company, but I apologized properly. So it's fine now, right? I need to hear you say it's fine. It seemed he was really worried about that issue. I sighed and responded to him. It's really fine. I have my own feelings about it, but it was just a way to get out of the situation. I have no intention of canceling the contract with your company. However, he seemed extremely paranoid, clinging to me with a pale face. Please don't destroy my company. It's the precious business I inherited from my father. I have a family to support. If you don't like me, you can harass me all you want, but please don't cancel the contract. At this time, he probably saw me as some kind of demon. What could have caused such a strong fixation? Let go of me. Why are you saying all this? After calming Daniel down, I asked him why he thought that way. He then began to talk about a past incident. I had a great father. He started a company and grew it significantly in just a few years, but he was framed by a rival company and was driven into a corner. According to Daniel, the incident became a big deal. It was widely covered on national TV. As a result, his family lived in shame, pointed at by many people. As a result of his hellish life, he says his father took the worst path and passed away. The person who framed my father was a high school dropout. He was famous as a young entrepreneur with outlandish ideas, but also notorious for his bad behavior. That's what made me hate middle school graduates. Because of that past, he labeled all high school dropouts as worthless troublemakers. Maybe due to the past events, he felt so strongly that he had to eliminate me. Hearing his story made me feel a bit sorry for him, so I looked him straight in the eye and spoke sincerely. I wouldn't be so cowardly if I had a rival company. Never. So please believe me, we're going to be family, and no matter what happens, I won't abandon you. If you're in trouble, I'll help. Hearing my words, Daniel let out a long sigh. His expression changed from one of fear to relief. He looked like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. I misjudged you. Yes, you're not the same as that high school dropout. It's shameful that I couldn't see that, he said sadly and apologized to me. It was a genuine apology. I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me. Of course, I replied. I can't refuse a sincere apology. After that, Daniel apologized profusely to Will and Mary. Even though we were able to work things out in the end, Daniel was still responsible for the atmosphere at the wedding. That's why he felt the need to make amends. Daniel wrote apology postcards to every guest. I have to clean up my own mess, he said. I heard that it was quite a challenge, as he had to think about the content carefully to suit each person he was dealing with. But that wasn't all he did. When Will and Mary were house hunting, Daniel visited each prospective house, checking its earthquake resistance, fire safety, and overall livability. When they had a child, he researched parenting methods and necessary tools. When Mary nearly suffered from postpartum depression, Daniel and my mother-in-law stepped in and provided significant help. My mother-in-law told me all about it. I didn't expect Daniel, who had been neglecting Mary, to be able to nurse his grandbaby with his hands. I was curious, but it must have been embarrassing for Daniel, so there was a joke order on that topic. Will, and I felt he had done enough to make amends, but Daniel seemed determined to continue finding ways to help. Incidentally, their child, a girl, loved superhero shows. She looked like Mary and had a cute appearance, but had a personality similar to Will's. She especially liked the main hero, Red. She was glued to the screen whenever he's on. I heard she watches hero shows on TV with great excitement. Seeing how happy they were made me interested in marriage too. There's a woman at my company I'm interested in, so I might propose soon. She and I became close because I saved her from being tangled up with a delinquent, a goofy opportunity that brought us together. She understands my hobbies, and we often watch cartoons together. It took some courage to share my hobbies with her, but her response made me very happy. No matter your age, being passionate about what you love is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with it. She makes me feel happy, so I hope my proposal goes well. She seems to be a middle school graduate, like me, but I don't judge her for that. Unlike Daniel in the past, people might have a negative image, but I believe that doesn't define her. If the proposal succeeds, I want to see her for who she truly is and cherish our relationship.